and this is getting popular now, and especially on YouTube, but still, I haven't seen anyone come up with a theory as good as mine, which is what the point of this podcast is, to share with you guys as much as I can. The final last piece, the cherry on top, I think is gonna blow your guys' minds. Yeah, and I may just say it all on this podcast. I don't know, Megan. I don't know. COHASH is my nickname. That's like my artist name and musician name.
Yeah.
So COHASH.
Pour me a little bit of that.
There we go,
absolutely.
Phil. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Okay.
All right.
This is why I work for myself.
Yeah. For real.
Now I'm
Like a
getting
little
excited.
shot? A little more?
A little more.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Got you. All right, I'll take one more shot.
Off camera or on camera?
Fuck it, we can do it on camera. If you want, you can start rolling if you want.
I'm rolling. Been rolling.
Oh,
Oh, shit.
oh,
2.5
bet.
minutes, just some extra.
Y'all, I'm 21 now. You know what the fuck that means.
Fiat.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. Let's go. Uh-oh. Straight from the bottle. Straight from the hip. Yeah.
Thank you, Phil.
That's right.
Shout out Phil, the best podcast producer. Pod Dog Studios for all your studio and photo shoot needs.
Yes, I will be doing a full spread,
Yes.
topless later after this,
Yep.
if you don't mind, Phil.
I don't mind.
All right.
If it makes dollars, it makes sense.
Hey.
Just like my great-grandpappy used to say.
All right. Well, welcome back to Your Friends Podcast. I'm your host, Megan Page, and this is my friend, COHASH.
What up, peeps? What up, peeps? Hello, Your
Yeah.
Friends Podcast.
Thank
be
you
here.
so much for coming here. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now let's get right into it. You're here today because for the past 7 years, you've been researching, working on a book. Now, I'm not going to give anything away. I'm just kind of going to let you take creative control. But what is the book about? Why is this relevant?
I'm currently working on a novel, and it's the working title is going to be Missing or Taken.
Okay.
And so what this is going to be about is about 7 years ago, I'm into true crime. I don't remember what sort of news story I was researching, but it had to do a kidnapping victim. I think it was called the Franklin cover-up or something like that. I don't suggest you Google it because it's a pretty gnarly story. From that, I got into these statistics talking about missing kids. And then when I started researching the number of people who are missing or taken, the name of the book, I was blown away. Fast forward to a few months later, I was turned on to this show called Coast to Coast AM, and super outdated form of media, but it was an AM talk show hosted by Art Bell. And this dude is a legend. If you guys Google him or look it up on YouTube, he's a legend in the game for paranormal. So most of his shows, everything was geared around paranormal events, all the things that you wouldn't really hear in mainstream TV or media. So it would be conspiracy theories, it would be aliens, it would be generally just sort of the things that are on the fringe of, I guess, forms of media. But this show was going on for a long time. I think when I got into it, it was probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The show's been on for a long time, and unfortunately, Art Bell passed away. But my dad used to listen to it because he was a big AM radio guy. And so when I was a kid, I kind of got into it myself. And one day, he had this author on, and his name was David Paulides. This is one of his books right here, Missing 411. And when I was listening to this interview, it was fascinating because he was talking about missing people. And this particularly had to do with people who go missing in national parks. So when I started getting into this, I think 6 or 7 years ago, it wasn't as popular and mainstream as it is now. Essentially, this guy that wrote these books, he was a police detective. I guess he's also an outdoorsman, and one day he was in a national park, and I don't know if he was researching a case, but he was staying in a hotel or a cabin, and then one of the rangers knocked on his door and wanted to talk to him about what was going on, some of the things that he's seen in his career. And basically, he told them that there's been a lot of strange disappearances in his park and in a lot of other national parks, according to some of his ranger friends. But the thing that was weird about it was that the national parks weren't really doing anything to solve the cases or even keep any sort of database on the statistics or the numbers of how many people go missing. And he was frustrated, or for whatever reason, he reached out to this author, David Paulides, and him being a retired detective, he started investigating it himself and compiling a massive amount of information. And he found out essentially that everything the park ranger said was true, and even worse, because with most inner city crime police departments, they have statistics on everything. They keep files on everything. So somebody gets murdered, somebody gets kidnapped, there's a robbery, whatever the crime is, there's statistics for it, and there's a database for it. What they found was in national parks, they don't keep any sort of record or database on these cases. So once a case is opened up, they'll do a search, a preliminary search, and after a while, either they'll find the person deceased and they'll close the case. Most of the times they say that this person died of exposure or hypothermia, or it would be undetermined in some cases. But the craziest thing is that we don't really know how many people actually go missing. And most of the times the law enforcement agencies do whatever they can to close the case and move on. So this leaves a lot of families out there without any sort of closure. It's kind of strange that the National Park Service has forest rangers. It's a government entity, and yet they don't keep any sort of statistics or database of the people who go missing in their parks.
That's extremely strange. I feel like that should be illegal.
Yeah, it is strange, because if you don't compile a database of the people who are missing, there's no way that you can analyze patterns. It shows that they sort of are covering up something, but no matter what conclusion you come to, it's definitely strange. It's not right. So this guy started writing these books, David Paulides, and he started compiling a database and a list of people that were missing. And so the more that he dug into this, the more cases that he got into, the more he started seeing patterns. They just kept coming and coming and coming. So they just kept adding up over the years. So he started writing. This is his third, The Devil's in the Details. I think he's written 4 or 5 books by now.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I will say about David Paulides is this guy is amazing as far as compiling the cases and the evidence and the databases. But where he falls short, and I don't want no beef with David Paulides, so like I'm not saying anything bad about him as an author or a researcher, but what always frustrated me after reading all these books is he never does anything to try to solve the case. In other words, there's never been a theory that I've heard from him as to what is taking these people. And for me, if you want to get closure for the families and you're trying to get to the bottom of this, I think, yeah, having a national database is a big part of it, is important. But what would be most important would be narrowing down a suspect, because if you're a detective or if you're a police officer and crimes are committed in your city, you're not just going to try to compile them on a list. I mean, your goal is to find out who the suspect is and eventually bring them to justice, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love that he wrote all these books, and I bet he has like great evidence and cases, but I would be frustrated if there was no theory behind it. Like, it's all saying, oh, all these people went missing, these certain cases, these patterns. But, you know, that would kill me to not know the theory. I feel like people who are reading that kind of might feel the same as you. Yeah. I want to know now.
Well, that's the same way that I felt. And most people who start reading these books or looking into these cases, they have that reaction. They start immediately formulating theories as to what's taking these people. So there's two sort of mysteries, which is what started me on this path of trying to get to the bottom of this, because one is, why don't our national parks and forests have a database of the people who go missing in their parks? Yeah. What would be the reason for that?
Cover up. That's like the only logical thing my brain goes to. I mean, obviously, people's brains can go to either way, but like that's the obvious one for me.
Yeah, because they're a law enforcement agency. Like, how do you not have statistics? And I think when he was writing these books, he was sending freedom of information requests to the different parks, asking them for the numbers and the databases and all that stuff. And a lot of times he got stonewalled, but the biggest takeaway from it was that they said, oh, we don't have any lists like that. We don't have any database. So that would point to either a cover-up, or maybe the more logical reason, which still is nefarious, would be that by them keeping track of all the people who go missing and making it public, it would decrease their tourism, because they don't want people knowing. Like, for example, in Yosemite here in California is the biggest cluster of missing people. Like, it's not something you want to advertise. So I understand that. But then the second mystery is, and again, I'm not trying to call out David Paulides. I love his books, but why doesn't he develop a theory? Because he's got more information than anybody. I mean, he's got the case files of these, and everyone like yourself who has heard of this topic or has read the books has some sort of a theory. So what bothers me is, why doesn't he have a theory, or why isn't he doing anything to solve these cases, being a former police detective? Because I've read 2 or 3 of these books, and they're fascinating, they're great, but they're just a compilation of all of the cases of missing people, which is great, but I want to get to the bottom of this, and I'll tell you why, to tie into your other question of why is this relevant, and why is this something that you guys should care about or worry about. Let me give you some statistics. So every year in America, the United States, there's 600,000 people that go missing. 600,000 bitches. And there's about 89, so I wrote this down, to 92% are recovered dead or alive. And it's actually unclear how many people disappear in the wild, because, again, they don't keep a database of these numbers. And these statistics come from the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs, in other words. And then I have statistics also from the National Crime Info Center, or Information Center. In 2021, there were 521,705 people reported missing. California, our home state, actually has the highest number of missing people. So currently in California, if I read this correctly, there's 2,133 people that are missing. And our number's so high that for every 100,000 people, 7.6 go missing out of 100,000. So we have the highest in the nation. The lowest rate is in Massachusetts. So I haven't done any research about Massachusetts. I just know I can't say it properly. But it's kind of creepy to know that in our state, there's the highest average of missing people. So there's a lot of national parks, but still at the end of the day, why are people going missing?
Yeah.
And there's a huge cluster on the East Coast as well. And actually, I have a map, which I got from the Missing 411 books. But if you look at that map, Megan, on the upper right or on your left, there's huge clusters there.
That's insane.
And I would probably guess that those aren't all national parks. Yeah. I mean, they might be, but California is a big state. And coincidentally, also in California, the biggest cluster of missing people is Yosemite National Park, which I've been there 3 times.
Well, that's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary that you've already been there, knowing like you could have been one of those missing people.
Yeah, this book and this information actually kind of ruined it for me.
Does it make you not want to go to national parks anymore?
Yes. Yeah. So I did go to Yosemite after doing all this research, and it was freaky. I had goosebumps and the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. Yeah, it was freaky.
For people who don't know, Kohash and I worked together at at a CBD store, and I got to hear some things, and they were fucking crazy.
I mean, so what's your initial reaction to just these numbers?
My initial reaction is, why are the national parks not having it in their databases? That in itself seems very suspicious to me. Second thought that crosses my mind is, I agree with you. I want theories. I want this author to deliver theories. If he is a detective, then why aren't we finding the suspect?
Yeah.
And that's what sets apart your book
Yeah.
from his, right?
Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to disparage David Paulides or talk bad about him, but being a former detective, it's just common sense. Logically, if there's crimes being committed, whatever it is, robberies or whatever you could think of, you don't just compile the numbers of them and then go home. Your job is to find the suspect and solve the crime. So I don't understand why he's not doing it in this situation. But I do know that as of the last couple of years, this has grown to be hugely, wildly popular, because when I was doing some research for the podcast, I started seeing that other people were sort of putting together the clues in the same way that I was. And I was actually surprised, because I've been doing a lot of research to write this book, and some of these theories that I had, I couldn't wait to come on and share with you. But I noticed that a lot of people were coming to the same conclusions, like sort of what you would call parallel thought. So I don't know if there's going to be some people out there that are going to comment that I'm ripping this person off, but I promise you, I've been doing this research on my own and sort of feeling like I was on an island, because I wasn't seeing anyone else come up with the theories that I've come up with. And this is getting popular now, and especially on YouTube, but still, I haven't seen anyone come up with a theory as good as mine, which is what the point of this podcast is, to share with you guys as much as I can, because I don't want to give away 100% of what I believe it is, because then there's not going to be any motivation to buy or read my book. Yeah. But I'm going to get pretty close to it. And the final last piece, the cherry on top, I think is going to blow your guys' minds. Yeah, and I may just say it all on this podcast. I don't know, Megan. I don't know.
We'll see. We'll see how it flows, how you feel. Now, my question is, are you going to talk about the theories, kind of like the main theories that people come up with first, and then kind of dive into your own? Because I know when we kind of talked about it, and kind of like what I would theorize myself from these is, first thought that comes to my head is sex trafficking, aliens, Bigfoot, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're going to dive into?
No.
Okay. All right.
Podcast over. No. Yeah, but actually, so let's go by perfect. So let's take your top 3 or 4 theories that you just came up with off the top of your head. So sex trafficking. Okay. I know that cannot be what's taking these people, for a number of reasons. For one reason is this has been going on, according to the information that David Paulides has put together. These cases with similar criteria have been going on for at least 200 years.
Wow.
Actually, probably longer, because I think since the 1700s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's no way it's like then that completely rules out like a sex traffic ring.
Yeah.
In my eyes, at least.
And I don't think there's sex traffickers that are climbing up mountains to steal people, to take people, because it would be a lot easier to
take people in cities.
Yeah, take people in the cities. You're not going to go into a national park where it takes you 45 minutes to an hour just to get to the freeway. And as a matter of fact, fun fact, but not really fun, for how dangerous California is and where we live, is sex trafficking is huge here. And I don't know if you knew this. Did you know this?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's actually really big here and in other cities in California. The reason being because think of how many freeways we have intersecting with our city.
Holy shit.
Right?
Yeah, like easy access,
Yeah.
essentially.
So that is one of the reasons why, is because you have a lot of major freeways that can take you out of the state. But we have, think of how many freeways we have going through California.
It's insane how many different freeways I've been on. And kind of been all over California.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of freeways we have that like connect, like go all the way to Maine, go all the way to the East Coast, like, and they all intersect. I've actually kind of looked at that on maps before, and it's very, very prominent.
So here's something interesting too, is I didn't know that human traffickers actually use buses and trains a lot too. Did you know that?
What? No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I was talking to this bus driver, and he told me this. And then I saw on one of the bus stops, or I guess they have these flyers posted everywhere, like warning people of human trafficking. And they use buses and trains because it's safer for the traffickers as far than using their own personal car, because then they have to worry about getting pulled over. And in buses and trains, you don't. So with airlines, you have to show your ID and things like that. For buses, you don't. And they just take women and get on a bus, and you can end up anywhere in Mexico or San Diego or wherever.
Shit, that makes so much sense, though. Like, the not getting pulled over thing is huge, not having to show your ID.
Yeah, because they don't fly, and they don't drive their personal cars all the time, because then, there's a big chance that they're going to get pulled over. So they use buses, regional transit, and trains. Places they don't have to show their ID. But anyway, so we can rule out human traffickers. Yeah. So what was your other?
I'm thinking aliens or Bigfoot.
Okay, so aliens, we'll go with that. One of the problems with aliens is, in a lot of these cases, or most of these cases, there's very few where people have reported any sort of aerial phenomena. I mean, you would think if there's ships or alien ships that are flying around and abducting people at these numbers, that somebody would see something. But the main thing is I don't really have any evidence to prove that. There was at one point where I considered aliens, because a lot of these people that go missing, so I'm just going to give you the criteria really quick, that this is what David Paulides has come up with, but here's what the majority, I would say over 90% of these cases actually have in common. The first one is when people go missing and there's a search party organized, immediately the weather turns bad. So while the person goes missing, or right after they go missing, the weather starts to turn terrible. Like it starts to pour, raining, or it starts to snow. But it's usually after or when the search begins, the weather turns so bad that they have to call the search off. And this is pretty strange that in the majority of these cases, like 80 to 90%, this happens. The second criteria that he's found is if the victim survives, they're either found asleep or there's no memory of what happened. So for me to solve this, that's one of the things that I was looking at is, okay, I need to find the cases of the people who have survived, because somewhere in there is going to lie the information to solve this, is with the people who are found. But unfortunately, they're found with no memory of what happened in most cases. In a few cases, the person that was found had some sort of mental disability, so they weren't able to communicate what happened. In the other cases, the child is too young to really be believed. For example, I wish I knew her name, but in one of these cases, there was a little girl that was taken, and she was missing for about 3 days. When they found her, so keep in mind the bad weather, it had rained and all that stuff. When they found her, she was dry, and she was pretty much well fed. And so they asked her, like, where were you for these last couple of days? Because you weren't out in the rain, you weren't soaking wet, and you're not malnourished. So she had something to eat or access to food. And the story that she told the search and rescue people were that she woke up in a cave, and there was a man with a dog face, and he had given her berries to eat. And when he left for whatever reason, he left her in the cave, she wandered out and was found. She reported that there was a man with a dog face that gave her berries. And I think in some of the cases too, where the medical examiner cut the person open, they found berries and other things in their stomach. If the police hear that, they're not going to believe her because they're going to, oh, a man with a dog face. So what are you talking about? But she had to be telling the truth because she wasn't wet. She was dry and she had eaten. Yeah.
And especially if they're doing autopsies and they're finding berries in the stomachs of other people who have gone missing, that's a pattern, like, in itself. That's insane to me. The fact that she says a man with a dog face, I can picture that in my head, and that's absolutely terrifying.
And a lot of times when these people are found alive, they will have a fever. They usually have, their memory is usually gone, erased, or they don't want to talk about it. There was a really good case, and I wish I had researched this better or had this prepared, but there was a guy that had been taken in the 70s, and immediately after they found him, they interviewed him, and they asked him what happened. And so he said that he started wandering around the forest, and he had just inexplicably got lost, but he didn't want to elaborate on what happened. He sort of just shut down. And this guy, I think, is still alive to this day, but he was found, he had a fever. I think he was missing some clothing, like a shirt or something like that, but he didn't want to say what happened, and he still never has spoken about it to this day. And it's unfortunate because I think, like I mentioned earlier, that's where we're going to look to eventually solve this. But yeah, it's very strange. There was another hiker that actually went missing in Yosemite. I think his name was Michael. But I remember I was at my mom's house, and I think we had dinner or something like that, and the news came on. We were watching the news, and I saw this story. It said, missing hiker found in a boulder field in Yosemite, and he was taken to the hospital. So I was like, yes, I was following the case because I wanted to see, what is the guy going to say? Because his case had all of the similar criteria. Another one is going back to the list of the criteria. So when they are found, they're usually found by a body of water or in a body of water or in a boulder field. So another thing that, going back to the UFO, the aliens theory, I kind of was going with aliens in the beginning because another similar thing that happens is when they find the people, they'll have scratches on their limbs or their bodies, and it'll look like they're being dragged. There's a lot of times where they'll have their pants pulled down to their ankles, which is kind of weird. So you're thinking, oh, okay, maybe somebody them or something like that. But if you think about, if you have a limp body and you drag it by under the arms, the pants get pulled down.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I was thinking, okay, maybe it is aliens. If they have drag marks and scratches on them, it could be them getting beamed up or or whatever, or dragged. But and then another reason why I could understand people thinking aliens would be because they're found too far away, farther away than they could have traveled in that amount of time. So a lot of times they're found in a high elevation, and it seems unthinkable of how they could have traveled there. For example, there was a 2-year-old that was playing in the front yard, and I'm probably going to butcher this, so I apologize. But essentially, he was playing, his mother was doing the dishes, and so she's standing at the window, he's outside, she's doing the dishes, he's playing with the dog. So it's just like this, she looks up, sees him doing the dishes, she looks up, and he's gone, just like that quick. And so she's like looking for him, didn't see him, so she goes out the front of the house, she starts calling his name, he doesn't answer, so she's looking around the house, she's like, what the fuck, like, okay, he should be around here somewhere. The dog was gone, he was gone, and then he was found, I think 2 days later, over 65 miles away up some hill that was like 3 miles up a hill. He had no shoes on. How could he have walked that distance, for one thing? And also, why would you go walk uphill? If you're lost, your instinct is not going to be to go climb a mountain. It's going to be to wander around or stay where you're at or go towards something like a road or something familiar. That's a terrible example because I don't have the details on it, but it's clearly strange, and it happens more often than not. So they're found and somewhere farther away than they could have traveled. And another piece of the criteria is that when they are found, this is so strange, they're often found in a place where they already searched.
What?
Yeah. Why would that happen, do you think? Like, it's strange, right? And it's not like this happens once or twice or 10 times or 12. This happens hundreds of times, over and over. This is probably one of the most common pieces of criteria they're found where people have already searched. Haven't done search and rescue, but I know sort of the protocol that they do because I do wildland firefighting. And so when you're on a crew and you put out the fire, you have to make sure that everything is out, nothing's going to catch on fire or light again. So what you do is you line up with your crew and you stand about, in some cases, it depends on how big the area is, but an arm's length apart, or sometimes 5 feet or 6 feet, or whatever the captain says. So we get in a line and we have a perfect formation. So we take however many steps up. So we'll go, say, 12 feet or 16 feet up and then stop. And the whole time we're looking at the ground, so we're making sure that there's no embers or anything burning or any exposed tree trunks that are burning, because a lot of times if the trunks are still burning, they can ignite the roots and then a fire will pop up way down here because it actually burns and travels through the roots under the ground, which is insane.
Whoa.
So we do this grid search to make sure that we cover every piece of land, and we're in a line, and then we'll flip over once we get to the end and then do it again, go this way and then flip over and cover. So that's how we do a grid search. So they do the search for these missing people in the same way. So and there's some cases where they'll actually use string and they'll tie string to the trees or to posts and they'll set up a grid so they know every inch of this area has been searched, right? So they've done this, and then 2-3 days later, they'll find the body right there. And so some people will say, oh, well, they must have missed him or they were incompetent or something. And that's not the case. They weren't there a couple days before, but they're there now. So, I mean, that's crazy, right?
What the fuck?
What does that tell you, just off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, that's telling me that something is taking these people and putting them back after they're done using them for whatever, for those 2-3 days. That's very clear to me that they're being taken by something and then put back near where they were found.
I mean, yeah, I started thinking about this and the animal kingdom and scientists or zoologists who go out and they do the tag and release. So when you pull some creature from the ocean or out in the wild, you tag it, you get the DNA, you take a little vial of blood, you're trying to see what diseases, if any, it has, and then you release it, but you do it where the pack's going to find it. You release it back in the pack so that it can, it's not going to be left on its own and die. A lot of times you release it back to the family, to the pack, or if it's a gorilla, you release it back to its family.
So you think whatever taking these people are doing kind of that same idea, so they do get found?
Yes, I do, because I can't think of any other reason of why would they end up where the people already searched. Yeah. And it's done consistently. So it has to be because they want us to find them for whatever reason. But a lot of times they're found dead, but they are found alive. I mean, there's some cases, like a very small percent, where they're found alive. But very strange. Very strange, Megan.
That's very strange.
Yeah. Okay, so there's more in the list of criteria. So this is how he sort of decided what group of cases he wants to put in this book. He follows this criteria because there's a lot of cases where people go missing, and it's because they want to commit, like the forest in Japan.
Right.
People want to go out. So if they have any sort of like mental health issues, or if they're or usually like on drugs, he'll not include those cases in these books. But all the cases that he does include fit this criteria. And just in this book alone, keep in mind that he's got 3 or 4 books written. There's hundreds of cases just in this one book. So this
my gosh.
Yeah, this is a list of missing people here out of the book.
Oh my gosh.
Missing people
It just keeps going.
in this one book.
And it does it state all those different cases or just like
Yeah, for the most part, it
Wow.
does. It does. And I don't know, am I allowed to read from this on YouTube, or will we get sued by David Paulides?
do you know, Phil? Maybe I'll just like put it in the description or kind of just say like we're reading this from
Yeah,
the book.
yeah, because I don't want to, take
Get
credit for any of this
copyrighted.
or get copyrighted. Yeah.
Do we have to take a break for the cameras? Okay. Are you cool with that?
And then we can
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Phil, I'm about to blow your mind with this shit.
Let's go, baby.
I'm so ready. All right.
Watch this. Hold my beer.
Hold my beer. That's awesome. Okay. Stizzy hit.
Stizzies.
I'm ready.
You're good to go, Megan.
Okay. I wonder if the smoke shows up in the camera. I don't think it does. All right. We're back from our break, but you didn't know anything happened because it's jump cut for you.
Jump cut.
Jump cut.
Yeah. Look at that. Oh,
Now, Kohash.
yes.
The common criteria for the missing cases in the missing 401 books. What is everything off of that criteria that is a common theme for all the cases?
So here's the most common themes in these cases. One is inclement weather. So when the person disappears almost immediately after or almost always during the search, it turns terrible. It either starts pouring rain or it starts snowing. And the weather is so bad that a lot of times they have to call off the search. The second thing is if the victim survives, they're either found asleep or they have no memory of what happened. And a lot of times they have a fever. The next one is that the bodies have scratches on the limb or the torso. Looks like the victim had been dragged. The next one is that they're found too far away to where they could have logically traveled. So they're found great distances away or miles and miles up hills and mountains that, especially if you're 2 years old, you could never have gotten that far in that amount of time. A lot of times the bodies are found in places where they already searched, and this is probably 90% of the time or more. They're found where they've already looked and know that this body was not there yesterday or 2 days ago. And in a lot of cases, I know this sounds strange, but they involve berries. Either picking berries or eating berries or being fed berries. Yeah, those are basically some of the common criteria.
And that's just like, that's with every case throughout these books, correct?
Yeah, it's in
That
the majority
seems like
of
a
them.
lot of common patterns to have.
As far as finding them in a place where they could not have traveled, we know that this happens a lot. One story where there was a gentleman who went with his family to travel during winter. They went to one of these countries that was on a mountainside. There was this town that the family visited to celebrate Christmas, and to get to that town, you have to take a train. There's no cars. It's just by train, or you can walk or ski. They go to this town. They have dinner. They go to the bar. The son in the family, which he's an adult, they're at a bar drinking. He's seen on CCTV talking to a female. He walks her out of the bar and walks her to the hotel. So all of this is caught on camera. He walks out from her hotel, and that's the last time he's ever seen again. So there's two towns on this mountainside, and he was lost in the first town. And keep in mind, you can only get from one town to the other by train. It's in the dead middle of winter. So the train stopped running after 10 p.m. So he goes missing. His parents are trying to call him and text him the next morning, and they can't find him. He doesn't answer. So they get their family together, and they go to the police. The police don't do anything. They're like, oh, he'll turn up, or he probably just left, and whatever. They kind of blew the family off. So the family was very rich. They paid an investigator money to come into the town and start interviewing people. And I guess it was a little different than America because they actually knocked on every door of every house in this town to find their son, thinking that he must be in one of these houses. They search everyone's house and haven't found the son for days. When he's eventually found, he's in the next town over, down a slope, and his cell phone had fallen out of his pocket and pocket dialed one of the relatives. But essentially, he went missing in this one town and was found in the next town over, down in an embankment, and there's no physical way he could have gotten there, because when he went missing, it was around 2 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m. The train stopped running at 10. You could not have walked that distance, and it was completely inexplicable.
What the fuck? I mean, you would absolutely die of the coldness of the winter, of hypothermia, of the cold. No human could. I've heard of this story, and there's no physical possible way a human can walk to that other town that long in the winter, in the snow, in the cold, without dying.
Yeah, so that's just one of the best examples I could think of, but there's many more where the kids are 2 years old, 3 years old, and they're found 30, 40 miles away in 24 to 48 hours, and they're up a mountain. But moving on, so that's the strange criteria that the majority, if not all of these cases, have in common. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was we went over the theories. So the human trafficking, what was the other one?
Aliens.
Bigfoot.
So now is Bigfoot a pretty big theory of this? It's one of the top 4, right?
Yeah, it is a big theory, but especially when you have some of the victims and the kids describing a bear that was walking upright, or dog-faced man. Yeah. So the reason why I don't buy into Bigfoot is because, first of all, I don't even know if he really exists. It's one of those things where you can't prove a negative. So there's never been like a dead Bigfoot found. I mean, there's been videos, but not a lot of evidence for that. And once again, these cases have been happening for probably 200 to 300 years. And Bigfoot is not in all of these states across the United States.
Yeah.
So I don't buy into the Bigfoot theory. The next theory that I had.
Okay, I'm so excited for this one. The fucking backrooms.
The fucking backrooms.
You have all heard of the fucking backrooms. I know that for a fact.
Yes.
So I'm super excited because you didn't tell me about this one, so.
Well, I discounted it. I didn't even hear of this theory of the backrooms until like a month ago.
Right.
So all the years I've been researching this, it wasn't a thing. And I don't know where it came from, but it's all over YouTube now.
All over. TikTok, YouTube.
Yeah, and Reddit.
Yeah, Reddit especially.
And so when I watched the videos on it, and I thought it just sounded strange. It didn't make any sense to me how somebody can just be walking in a city or wherever they are, and suddenly they awake in this back room, like these offices that all look the same, and you're lost, and there's certain rules that you have to follow in order to get out of them. So I didn't really give that much credence, but then one thing kind of made it seem plausible, because in some of these cases, the person, and I've heard some of these from the accounts of people who have survived, they describe walking through the forest and suddenly they get disoriented for whatever reason. And then they get lost. So they're walking in circles, or they're trying to find their way back to the path or the road, and they can hear the other people searching for them. But when they call out to them, the search party can't hear the person. In some other cases on the other end, there's been the searchers said that they were going through looking for this person, and they heard a whistle or they heard a cry for help, and they looked around and they didn't see anyone there. So that kind of makes the backrooms theory look plausible, because it's almost like there's an alternate reality where these people are close by, but they just can't see or communicate with each other.
Right.
But then again, it doesn't seem like the most logical to me. There's also cases where they've pinged the person's cell phone, and they can actually see the distance or where the person traveled. So you know that the person was physically there, and then they'll find the phone like under a rock or in the water or something like that, but they won't find the body.
That's weird that the phone would be under a rock or in the water, almost like it was hidden.
Yeah, so another one of the criteria is that they're usually found in or by water. Many, many times they're found by water, and with some clothing removed, either their shirt, their pants, or all of their clothing. And here's what really tripped me out is there's been people that went missing, and then they found their pants and their clothes folded up, like by a riverbed or a creek. They're folded, but they still can't find the person.
What?
Yeah.
That
So-
almost seems like a sick joke. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's creepy.
It's definitely strange.
Have you looked into skinwalkers being a theory, or is that really not a top theory? Do you know about skinwalkers? I just remember like when you said the search party heard a cry for help, but there was no one there. I know like the theory of like skinwalkers, they're supposed to like imitate human beings, and I think someone in the audience might kind of be thinking of that. So have you
Yeah,
think
and
about that?
and I'm Native American, so that's pretty big in the Native American culture, is skinwalkers. There's a great episode. If you guys want to watch it on Netflix, it's Unsolved Mysteries, and the episode is Paranormal Rangers, where it talks about the skinwalker, and there's basically 2 reservation police that talk about their stories of people having encounters with skinwalkers and investigating it. And it's pretty crazy. By the end, you kind of like are wondering what's going on. And it sounds believable, but again, with the skinwalkers, with the skinwalkers,
Skin rockers.
and the back rooms, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the most logical theory. So I had to come up with my own.
I'm so ready. Let's get into it.
And I want to tell everyone that I am the one abducting all these people. I'm a kidnapper. No, no, that's
Just
actually,
I'm just like, fuck, we got another serial stalker.
it's actually me.
No.
No. Okay. Well, oh, by the way, though, that is one of the other theories. That is some sort of satanic cult that's doing this
Okay.
in national parks. But that also doesn't make sense, because would the same cult be around for 200 to 300 years?
Yeah, and I feel like people would kind of maybe see something, you know?
So because there's no one seeing UFOs or alien ships, because you would have to see these with all of the people that go missing,
Yeah.
I kind of ruled out aliens, and it just doesn't seem as logical to me as this. If the people are found and the kids are found like vast distances away, with drag marks sometimes, but up mountains and things like that, if they're not getting there by their own accord, then something must be taking them there. And if it's not a ship, how else would they be transported there? So what do you think? Like, just what was your opinion?
It makes me think of having stairs inside the mountain where you go inside the mountain and go up. And, like,
Yeah.
you don't have to walk all the way up the mountain, because how are they getting there that quick? Even if it's a creature or, you know, whatever, how are they making that much effort to drag this body all the way up the mountain? I feel like there has to be some sort of shortcut.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. So if it's not through the air by a ship, then there's only 2 other ways that I could think of. Through the water, because they are found in or near water many times. And one of the interesting things about being found in or near water is the medical examiners and the police want to close the case. So they say if he was found in water, they died of accidental drowning. But the only thing is that can't happen unless you have water in the lungs, unless you
Right.
aspirate.
Right.
So there's been cases where they've concluded they drowned, but there's no water in their lungs. And if you drown, you're going to aspirate and breathe in water, and it's very easily proven. There's also some cases where it's inconclusive, and the medical examiner will say that they found no drugs or alcohol in their system, or they'll just say that it's inconclusive. So I'll get back to that in a second. But if it's not through the water, then it would have to be underground.
Yeah.
That's the only other thing that makes sense.
That's the only other thing that makes sense to me. I cannot think of any other logical explanation.
Yeah, so if we start to go down that path, that theory of it being underground or underwater, I started wondering, okay, well, what could be alive for all these years, taking people underground, vast distances away, just doing it consistently with impunity? In other words, going back to the national parks, not keeping a database of this. So I mentioned that one of the reasons could be because they don't want to discourage people from visiting their parks, right? Another reason could be, because keep in mind it's ran by the federal government, is that they are aware of what's happening.
They know.
They know what's happening. So it's not a mystery or shocking to them. They know what's going on. And I started following down this path of logic. And what I started to realize was there is something going on. Like right now in the United States, in some park somewhere, these people, or whatever you want to call them, entities or humanoids, are actively living, they're actively stalking or taking people right now as we speak. I think that the federal government knows about it because there was a treaty. So in 1954, I don't know if you heard of this, it's going to sound crazy, but in 1954, there was something that was called the Greada Treaty. There was a geologist by the name of Phil Schneider that...
Phil!
Oh, not that Phil. Are you related to Phil Schneider? Oh, okay.
I hope he's not related to Dan Schneider. That man has a foot fetish.
Okay.
Okay, anyways.
I asked if you're related, even though you just have the same first name, not the last name. So that made no sense. But... man. Oh, wait. I want to go, before I go into that theory, I'm going to finish it, I promise. But I told you guys I was going to read a little bit from this book.
Yeah.
And cue the creepy music, Phil.
Yes.
Okay, so you asked about Jared Atadero earlier.
I did.
Right? All right, kids, get in close. This is going to be my ASMR voice. All right, this is one story about a kid who went missing near Gray Rock Mountain, and his name was Christopher Vigil. He went missing, it was April of 1978 at Gray Rock Mountain, Colorado. He was 9 years old. Gray Rock Mountain isn't imposing. When you're in the parking lot in the Cache Le Poudre River Valley, you can't even see it, but the trail starts after you cross the river and then abruptly climbs into 2,000 feet, a little over 3 miles. This trail is not for people who aren't used to climbing at or over 7,000 feet in elevation. After you reach the top of the trail, you are rewarded with a stellar view of a giant solid rock, the mountain. April 30th, 1978 at 2 p.m., Marion Vigil decided to take her 2 sons from their residence in LaPorte to Gray Rock Mountain for an afternoon hike. LaPorte is one of the closest cities to the mountain, and the trip was quick. At 2:30, Marion took her 4-year-old son, Eric, and her 9-year-old son, Chris, across Highway 4, and then they crossed the Poudre River, making their way to the trail. The group was just 1/4 mile into their hike when Chris told his mom that he was going to jump ahead and meet them at the top. This probably wasn't an unusual request since Chris ran 2 miles every day at a local track, putting him in excellent shape. So this is another common thing that happens is the child or the person just slips out of view. And if they're walking in a group, a lot of the times it'll be the first person in the group or the last one. As soon as they get out of sight or no one's watching, they disappear. So essentially, Chris made his way up the switchbacks, and at some point, he met a single man hiking the trail. His name was Alan Chopin. He and Alan struck up a conversation and then somehow got separated. So Chris continued up the trail. He came upon 2 girls and he asked if they had seen the man. The girls stated that they had, and he was up ahead. Chris took off up ahead, and then the two started yelling Alan's name. So the girls that Chris had passed on the trail ate their lunch, and they started back down when they reported that they were passed by Mr. Chopin. They stated that he appeared to be in a rush, and he looked worried. They reached the bottom of the mountain where Chopin met with Marion and assisted in reporting Chris as missing. So Marion and Eric had terminated their climb when they had determined that the trail was too difficult. The trail was too difficult, and they were waiting at the car for Chris. Marion called the Larimer County Sheriff. By 6:38 p.m., the on-scene deputy had called for helicopter support, and at that time, the first obstacle hit searchers. So at this point, he's missing. They called in air support, and the weather turned horrific, like we talked about earlier. It was rain, sleet, and fog. They were still keeping the mountain shrouded, and no air support could be utilized. So the helicopter that they called got sent back because it was no visibility. Now, on Tuesday, there was 12 inches of snow on the ground, and it was still accumulating. So this is how bad the weather got, though. 150 searchers made the trek up the mountain, and there was partial clearing that allowed 2 helicopters to fly into the area. The searchers were on the ground and in the air, were finding no evidence of tracks or discarded clothing. Essentially nothing to show that Chris was on the mountain. So this is one thing that's interesting. When it does snow like that, it almost makes it easier in a way to track someone that's missing because you could see their tracks easily in the snow. But they didn't see any tracks. So essentially they made a request to the governor. He called the National Guard out, and they determined that it was going to cost $50,000 to activate the guard, and the request was denied. This area where Chris actually went missing is the same area. It's right next to where Jared Attadero disappeared on October 2nd, 1999.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Same area.
The same area. It was just a few miles apart.
Wow.
And that's the case that you were asking about earlier, where this dad was walking with Jared, and he had just he was a little, 20 feet ahead. He goes to turn around a corner, and his dad walks, turns the corner, and he's gone just that quick.
That one was crazy because he was found several miles away, but one of the things that creeped me out was his clothes were up a tree.
And they didn't find him for 2 years. This is actually in the story on the Netflix documentary. It talks about it and interviews the family. I think a couple years later, they found his skull cap up a mountain.
What?
Yeah.
The fuck?
They found some of his bones in a skull cap, and they figured, it must have been a mountain lion. But check this out, though. At the same time, when Jared and his family were camping by Gray Rock Mountain, where this other kid, Chris, went missing, there was another family that was in the campsite. So the police came, and they interviewed the family, and they asked them what they saw. I think maybe it was the father said that we saw a bear man, what looked like a bear, walking upright and carrying something up the mountain. And then the FBI came in to investigate the case. So here's what's weird, too, is the FBI doesn't investigate missing person cases.
Yeah.
So what were they doing there?
Yeah, wait, I thought that was like a huge thing that they stay away from.
Yeah, they don't.
They don't typically do that.
They don't, but they've been investigating a lot of these cases. They show up at the crime scene, and the only thing that I can think of is, once again, the government knows what's going on. They've been keeping tabs on this for however many years. So back to Chris, though, he was never found. 34 years after Chris Vigil vanished, Larimar detectives made contact with Marion, I think his mom, and took DNA swabs to enter into a national database of missing people. To this date, Chris has never been found.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that goes back to the cluster thing. So in the United States, David Paulides put together this map of all the missing people, and he started to see that there was clusters. There was a pattern. So these two boys went missing in Colorado, and he noticed, okay, Yosemite in California is one of the biggest clusters, right?
Right.
All the missing people in national parks. And real quick, I'm going to show you a map of some of the cave systems these are the most popular cave systems in the United States. So,
And then when we run this back, I'll do a side-by-side so
Yeah.
they can really... Because this is shocking enough for me. When you came here and laid this out for me, I'm like, well, what the fuck? That seems pretty damning evidence
yeah.
to me. And what exactly do these maps show or prove?
So this proves my theory, as I mentioned earlier. If these people aren't getting moved and abducted through the air, then it must be underground. That's the only way that they could end up, miles and miles away with nobody seeing them get there, and also the searchers not seeing them get there, because there's no way that a 2-year-old child can walk 3 miles up a mountain or a hill. And again, it doesn't make sense. And there's been kids that have done that with no shoes. So I think they're being taken through caves into the mountains and underground and brought there. So now we have another question. Okay, so who's taking them? So is this theory correct? Is there really underground tunnels and caves? Well, not only do these maps line up almost perfectly, but it turns out that there is what we have in this country called DUM bases, deep underground military bases. Have you ever heard of those?
I have.
What do you know about them?
Not much. I have a friend who was in the Army, family friend, and he kind of mentioned them a little bit, but I don't know too much about it. What exactly is the definition of these underground bases?
So DUM is the acronym, Deep Underground Military Bases, and this is going to tie into Phil Schneider.
Okay.
So before I was even investigating the missing people, I was watching these videos on YouTube of Phil Schneider, and watching this guy speak and hear his story was insane. I didn't believe it. I was like, oh, this dude's insane. He's a geologist that was a contractor for the military to build these bases. So again, unrelated, but they tied together. So in a lot of these states where you have these clusters or the cave entrances, in New Mexico in particular, they are guarded by a military outpost, like heavily guarded. And it's very strange, like why the military would guard cave openings. And there's a whole Operation High Jump that has to do with Antarctica that I'm not going to get into, but you guys should Google it because it's fucking insane.
Is that about the plane and the guy with the journal?
Yes, Admiral Byrd.
I watched a whole video on that. That shit was so cool.
Yeah, and how that ties in essentially is because they think that there is a civilization or an opening that goes into the earth there, which to this day, we can't fly over Antarctica. Did you know that?
You mentioned that to me, and that makes so much sense. I mean, we're not allowed to fly over there. Why is that?
Yeah, why? To this day.
What would be the point?
No commercial airplane can fly over Antarctica. So it's very strange. But essentially, because they're hiding some sort of opening or there's some shit there that we're not supposed to see with some other civilization, allegedly. But yeah, Admiral Byrd said that you can go from pole to pole within a matter of minutes. And he's saying that he actually did it. So during Operation High Jump, after that was a failed mission and all of these people got killed, they came back to America. On their way back, they went to Argentina or Chile, I think. He did an interview with one of the local newspapers and told them about some of this shit. But the journal wasn't found until after he died by his son.
Yes.
And that's where he went into detail with this. So that's one connection with the military and these underground bases. So back to Phil Schneider. When I was watching this guy's videos, side note, if you look for it on YouTube, they've all been removed. So if this guy, Phil Schneider, is just a crazy conspiracy theorist, if it's just all bullshit, why are his videos removed?
Yeah.
I don't think to this day you could find them on YouTube. And I know I watched them all on YouTube a few years ago. So his story was he was a geologist who was hired by the military to inspect the rocks to build these underground bases, right? And he talks about in one of his stories or one of his lectures that there was he was involved in an underground shootout with some alien creatures. And on the surface, it sounds insane, but what kind of gave this guy credibility was on the video, he lifts up his hands and you could see he's missing fingers. And then he lifts up his shirt and he has a huge, like, you could see a huge scar where he had some sort of surgery. So he's missing fingers and he has this huge scar. He says it was from this alien firefight while they were building one of these bases. So essentially what happened was they went underground and they started drilling into something, and it turned out that it was the roof to a cavern. When they got into there, they were guarded by the Green Berets, but there were some sort of humanoids or alien creatures that saw them, and they got into a firefight. They had some weapon on their chest, or they pointed like this and shot some sort of energy weapons at the people. Phil Schneider says a lot of people died, but he got hit, and that's why he was missing fingers and had this huge scar. So that kind of gave him a little credibility. But during this lecture, Phil Schneider talks about something that happened in 1954, which is what I mentioned earlier, the Greada Treaty. So this was a speech that he gave at 1995 for the Preparedness Expo. And the book says it could be seen on YouTube, but not anymore. So essentially, this guy says he was a whistleblower, and he says that there's 11 distinct races of aliens that live under the earth, and that there's 2 of these races are friendly, and they work in cooperation with the U.S. government. The most important part, because I know we're running out of time that I want to get to, so there's the alleged firefight that it talks about in the Dulce base. And this book, by the way, is by Mark Dice, Illuminati Facts and Fiction, which is what I'm reading this from, just so I don't get sued. Essentially, what it is in 1954, the president at the time had made a deal with these aliens or these humanoids, these people that live in the earth. And he said that you're allowed to abduct so many people every year as long as you notify us or you let us know and you don't let it get out of control. It was sort of like a peace treaty. In exchange, they got some sort of technology. I mean, that's the gist of it, because I don't want to take up too much time, but that's what the story talks about, and that's what he said in his lectures, is that this happened in 1954. So I don't think that these are alien creatures. I think that they are another species that developed underground and that is still here today, and they are what's essentially taking people. Another thing that's interesting is this happened in 1958. So I started looking through the statistics because one of the things that I wanted to look at to solve this is the missing people in chronological order. What decade were the most people taken or missing? And it turns out from this book, it was the 1950s.
Right before the treaty. Do you think around like 200,000 people a year from these underground humanoids, aliens, do you think like that's kind of like the number that the treaty agreed on? Or do you think they're taking more than what they originally like signed? Like, do you have a personal opinion about that?
No, I don't. But to whatever they agreed to, the other race or the species abandoned the deal, and they just decided we're going to do whatever the fuck we want. So all these things tied together, all these things by themselves seem a little bit crazy, but when you tie them together, when you look at the cave systems lining up perfectly with the clusters, and then you hear about this Greada Treaty, it starts to make sense. And in many cultures, even the Native American culture, they talk about the ant people. The ant people were this civilization that lived underground, and they came to the surface to help humanity back in ancient times. They helped them, and they gave them technology, and then went back underground. There's many, even in archaeology, there were the Denisovans, which were this cave-dwelling species, or one of our ancestors, our early ancestors, because there's Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, Neanderthals. But when archaeologists look at the missing link and they can't figure out, well, how did the human brain double? Here's my theory, and I know this may sound nuts, but the missing link was this other species that evolved separately underground. So we haven't found them yet, but that's because they went underground. So for thousands of years or hundreds of years, they've been evolving underground simultaneously while we have, sort of like a breakaway civilization. So, I mean, it sounds crazy, but even in Africa, there's all sorts of legends of these underground people. And another thing is, I was talking to you about this earlier, in Turkey, they actually found a city that you guys can Google or YouTube. There was a city in Turkey where there was a whole civilization built into it. So from the side of the hill and the mountain, you could see all of the cave entrances. When they went in, they found that there was places of worship. There were barns for the animals. There was places where, like, I guess, little houses, and they were all separated by, there was a whole city that's basically goes 6 levels underground where up to 20,000 people lived. So we know
20,000.
Yeah.
That's a whole city. That's bigger than my hometown.
Yeah. And that is facts. Like, anybody can Google that or just watch the video on YouTube. The city's called Derinkuyu in Turkey. And yeah, that's just one of the examples of many that I've found. So we know that people have dwelled in caves. We know that there was another, I guess, ancestor that is related to us, the missing link that we haven't discovered. And to me, this makes the most sense out of any of the theories, the human trafficking, the Bigfoot, all that stuff, aliens, because the craziest thing about this is the fact that they, I believe, are existing like right now. This is happening. Somewhere in the United States, somebody's being taken. And I think that it's just people that live below the ground.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's a lot to digest, but in my eyes, it's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah, it has to.
Every other theory, like the way you have ruled it out, is very convincing. And the facts are all there. The cases are all there. The evidence is all there. So it's very prominent to me that the only thing that makes logical sense are cave systems. And the fact that it matches up perfectly with the missing people clusters, that's insane. Yeah, I mean, you look at the maps and there's just no doubt in my mind. And even if I'm wrong, which I don't think that I am, because there's no one else putting out legitimate theories that have done the amount of research that I've done. I mean, it just makes the most sense to me that there's legends in every culture of the ant people or people that live underground. Something is taking people and they're doing it in a way that we can't figure out. Another thing
is there is a prophecy in a major religion that actually talks about these people. And so you wonder why they're taking us, like what are they doing with these human beings? I think that they are studying us, our biology, and they are trying to learn about us as a human race to potentially enslave or go to war with, or maybe build some sort of biological weapon.
I think that's the most interesting theory that I've heard. I haven't heard anyone talking about this theory and I'm huge into conspiracy theories. I watch that shit on YouTube all the time.
Yeah.
Like from random ones to whatever, and I haven't heard this. How did you know that you wanted to study this? And I know we talked about this in the beginning, but did you know that you wanted to write a book on it the first couple times you heard about it, or did it take you a little bit to be like, okay, I want to dive into this, I want to research it, I want to make a book about it?
Plan to give more detail in the book, Missing or Taken, but the reason why is because the thing is I'm a very curious person, and I'm fascinated with true crime and mysteries, and the fact is whether you want to believe my theory or not, this is happening. Like, this is happening every year. 600,000 people go missing, and the majority of them are found either dead or alive, but there is probably 15 to 18% that are never found again. And I do want to solve it because it's fascinating to me. I mean, it's scary, but it's fascinating. And it's also strange that the government isn't doing anything about it. They're just keeping private or secret lists and databases of it. So when I started to see a pattern in all of the separate things that I was researching, like the Phil Schneider YouTube video, the Missing 411, the stories from the Native Americans and the ancestors, they just all started falling into place. And so the problem that I had, or that I'm still having with the book, is do I want to present it in a way either in fiction or nonfiction?
Right.
Because I feel like if you get a quick condensed version of the story, you're going to think I'm insane, like I'm David Icke with reptilians or whatever. But if you look at the evidence that I've set aside in my book, it really kind of starts to make sense. Like, we know there's underground military bases. We know the military guards some of these openings. We know that there's been cities in caves. We know that there's stories of skinwalkers and the ant people, and we know that this has been happening for at least 200 to 300 years. And another thing, too, is there's a video that I showed you before we started of a mine, the McCoy mine, I think, where these people wanted to go explore the mine. I don't know what they were thinking they were going to find, but certainly not what they found, which was a huge pile of shoes with feet in them.
No. Insert video.
Yeah.
That's a reminder
video.
For me to insert the video.
Yeah, and another thing is, in Canada, every year, feet and shoes wash up on the shore. Like, every year this happens.
Mm-hmm. I've heard about that one. That one's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
'Cause what? And they still don't know. They don't know.
They don't know, but they don't even care to, like, solve it, or
Right.
they'll just come up with some bullshit theory. Like, I saw something, I didn't click on it earlier, that said, oh, the mystery of the feet washing up on shore solved. But and then in Yellowstone Park, they found a foot floating in one of the pools, the geyser or whatever. And it's on the news for one day, and then it disappears.
That's weird. I remember seeing, like, one of the theories for the shoes that wash up with feet. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
well, the bodies disintegrate in the water, but then the foot's left in the shoe. I don't know. And then another theory is, like, serial killer. But I don't know. Those just don't make much sense to me. I feel like something bigger is going on.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of other people do, too.
Yeah, of course. I do too. And I don't know. I think that my theory, it's not to set me above anyone else, but to me, it's the most logical, the most credible.
Yeah.
Is that there is another civilization that's living right beneath us, and we don't even know. We just go on about our days. But I definitely won't feel the same, whenever I visit a national park anymore, like Yosemite.
Yeah, I am not going into any national parks, and neither should you. Imagine this blows up, and then no one goes to national parks anymore.
That'd be awesome.
And, like, you go on Joe Rogan, and everyone's just like, nope.
And then I get murdered by a group of park rangers.
Yep.
Beaten.
Or the Illuminati.
Found dead. Oh, and by the way, Phil Schneider was found dead in his apartment, and he was apparently he committed by wrapping his catheter tube around his neck 3 times when he only had like 3 or 4 fingers on one hand.
That does not add up. That does not add up at all.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is if this guy was insane, if all of what he was saying was bullshit, why are all the videos taken off of YouTube, and why was he found dead? You know what I mean?
It's fucked up.
It is. It is. But I know the government, between the FBI and the National Park Service, knows what's happening. They know this is going on. And I don't know what's going to happen to this video, but we're on to you.
Are you worried for your safety if you come out with this book? Are you worried the Illuminati is going to come and find you?
No, because I know karate. No, not really. I'm not afraid to die. Like, in my line of work and the stuff that I've done before, I've had to risk my life for strangers. And I know I've had a view into the Illuminati and the Bohemian Grove and the Masons and things like that. And I don't live my life in fear. Because the biggest thing is I just want to solve this mystery. I just want to know what the fuck is taking people. Here's the thing is, like, I don't know how to prove this at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
All you can do is compile the evidence, the facts, the patterns, the maps.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. But to me, that is clear-cut evidence.
Yeah, and
in my eyes.
And another thing is, like, when these bodies are found and the medical examiner goes to determine the cause of death, like I mentioned earlier, they'll say it's drowning when they didn't have water in their lungs. They'll say it's inconclusive, or they'll say they died of exposure and hypothermia or whatever. And it's in the cases where they say it's inconclusive, this has bothered me because a lot of these cases are inconclusive. So I thought to myself, how can this be inconclusive? Or when the family asks, were there any drugs or alcohol in their system, the victim's system, why is that inconclusive? I mean, can you think of any reason why?
Cover up. That's exactly what I think. Cover up.
Or from a medical perspective, I think these bodies are drained of blood.
Holy shit. I didn't even think about that.
They have to be, because if they had blood in the body, they could do a toxicology report.
Right.
So why can't you look what's in their system? The only thing I could think of medically is because there's no blood in their bodies.
But they can't really say that and report that because people would freak the fuck out.
Well, then it leaves the case open too, because then you know that it wasn't accidental. It wasn't like this was done intentionally, which is the reason why a lot of these sheriff's departments and police departments just write it off so quickly. They'll do that search, they'll not find the person, and then case closed, it was an accidental this or that. And these people, like, clearly weren't suicidal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that they died of exposure. I mean, to me, there's something else going on. I'm trying to figure out, like, why do the people have a fever, and what is it that's erasing their memory? That's one of the things that I haven't really been able to figure out that kind of bothers me.
Yeah, that would bother me too, like maybe some sort of technology. Are there any final thoughts that you have, maybe kind of stating what more is going to be in your book versus what we've talked about today?
I don't want to give away, like, the ending. I'm pretty much just going to go more into detail of what I've laid out. I'm going to lay it out in a more coherent way. But what I'm saving for the book is who I think these people are. And
Ooh.
yeah, and it actually ties into, I will say this, that if my theory is wrong, you know, I hope that it is, but at the end of the day, like, I still want to know what's taking these people. But everything that I've looked at just points to that my theory is correct. And in the book, I will share with the readers a religious prophecy that almost proves everything that I said is going to happen.
Could you give away what religion, or is that kind of too risky to talk about? Like, in terms of kind of wanting to save it for the book and the readers?
I think if I did,
people would figure it out.
Then they would figure it out. And, you know, then there wouldn't really be a reason to buy the book, which I'm still writing.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that everything, as far as me developing a profile of these people and who's doing this, everything fits with this prophecy. And the weird thing is that another reason what inspired me to do this is because all of these different things, through being a conspiracy theorist or a critical thinker, all of this research that I've done on separate areas kind of just joined and came together. And then I had a conversation with a friend of this particular religion, and he told me about this prophecy, and I got goosebumps. Like the hair on my neck stood up when he told, yeah. I want to tell you so bad, but then I'm like, I don't want to give away everything. But when he told me this prophecy, I was like, bro, this is fucking insane. Like, this is legit what it is.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, you better buy this book. I'm reading this book. I cannot wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everything that we talked about here, you wanted to save for the podcast. And that was even so crazy hearing that for the first time, all of this information. That in itself, that there's a prophecy, I'm excited to read that. And, like, how you were going to go into detail, like, I'm excited. There's clearly a big reason for me at least, to want to read this book.
Yeah, and if anybody watching has any ideas or theories that we didn't mention, feel free to comment and let me know. Or let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I would or see if you can guess what the prophecy is.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Guess the prophecy or the religion in the comments below. And maybe even give it a like while you're at it.
Oh, yeah. Give it a little like.
Yeah.
And subscribe to the Your Friends podcast.
Yeah, subscribe. If you don't want to, if you just want to watch it, it's okay. We can chill out. We can vibe. But definitely helps.
Yeah. And are you... any takeaway, any questions or that you have, any takeaway from this for you? Was it, I hope this was worth it. I hope it was interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like this was a great first episode back, especially.
Yeah, congratulations. You're back.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm back. I'm back with no co-host. We're doing it solo.
No co-host with COHASH?
No co-host with COHASH. You already know. Yeah, I do have a very big takeaway from this. Are you ready?
Yes, always.
I am never going to another national park in my fucking life.
Oh, shit.
And I honestly, I'm scared of them anyways before this, but this just is the cherry, the whipped cream, the sprinkles on top for me. I'm good. I'm done.
Oh.
I don't need to go to a park.
I'm sorry to ruin that for you.
No, it's okay. I like camping. But that's just too much for me. I like me a nice campsite. National forest. Who knows what's out there? No, thank you. No, don't catch me near the cave systems.
I'm telling you,
Nope.
It's got to be the caves. And I was a huge outdoors person before this, and I love the outdoors. I would walk anywhere by myself at night, during the day, but now just knowing that there's something out there watching and waiting, I won't ever go to a national park alone. And the guy who wrote this book, David Paulides, tells all of his listeners that you never go out into a national park by yourself, never go without a gun, and if you do, carry a transponder on you, so a GPS transponder, so that you can be tracked, because it's something's out there.
Now, let me ask you the same question. What is your takeaway from all of this? Everything you've learned, everything you've studied.
Well,
what's your biggest takeaway?
I mean, my biggest thing is the people who are, I guess, there to protect us, the National Park Service, the government, police departments, detectives, medical examiners, is that they would rather explain away, give some bullshit reason to explain these cases away or close the case, rather than get to the bottom of this, solving this mystery. And that's the thing, is I just think that we have to do better than that. And somebody has to do something to solve this, and this is my attempt at it. But at the end of the day, if what I believe is true, then we are all gonna know one day, as the prophecy says, there will be a day when this race of humanoids or things come to the surface. I hope I'm wrong, but we'll find out
Hope you're
one
wrong,
way
too.
or another.
Follow-up question really quick. Last question.
No more questions.
Are you religious at all? You don't have to say what religion if you are, but just kind of curious. I think some of our audience might be too.
Yeah, I'm a devout Luciferian and a Wiccan. No,
I'm a Slytherin.
I'm a Slytherin, and I am immune to fire. Well, I am. So I had religion force-fed to me when I didn't even have a choice. I was born into Christianity, into a cult-like sect that I won't name because I don't want to offend anyone at the end of the day. I joke around a lot, but I hope I don't offend anyone out there. But I was born into religion and then finally fled home and the religion at the age of 17. So now I have a different view of religion in the sense that I see it for what it is. And at the very least, anything that men have their hands in is going to be corrupt or perverted at some point on a more I guess, nefarious or evil sort of cynical view. It's just a way to command and control humanity. And a lot of people have died. A lot of human beings have been killed in the name of religion. A lot of land has been taken from the Native Americans and the Mayans, for example, by Catholics or Christians. You know, like when the Catholics went over, or the Spaniards, to conquer the Mayans, they saw that they were committing murder, doing human sacrifices, and they destroyed everything they could of their civilization, which is unfortunate, and wiped them out, and then burning witches at the stake and all sorts of things like that, the Holy Wars, the Crusades. What about you?
I classify, I can kind of relate to being force-fed religion, and probably not in the most proper way growing up. As of right now, I'm kind of at a stance where, honestly, I'd be age 7 or 8, and I'd go into my mom's room crying. And I'd be like, I don't understand. Why are we in the middle of space? Where do we go when we die? And I just have these existential crises at such a young age. And I don't know if that kind of contributed to where I stand now. But right now, I kind of stand more on the spiritual side. I believe that there is something out there, whether you want to call it a god or the universe or something. I believe in karma. I believe in reincarnation. I kind of class myself as somewhere between atheist, spiritual, agnostic, somewhere in the mix of there.
That's a tough question, but I definitely think that there's a lot of good from all the religions.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be honest, I mean, if it makes a human being not murder and not steal and be a good person, I think it's a great thing. But when people follow it blindly, or they commit genocides or murders in the name of religion, it gets a little sketchy, or fight wars over it. Like, how many wars have been fought over religion? And I don't want to offend anyone. Once again, I still do believe in God and Jesus and things like that, but I think that it could be dangerous in the wrong hands,
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I like your quote, how you said anything that men, women, humans touch could be perverted. I like that quote a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a truth for religion, politics, anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wrapping that up, do you have anything to say before we kind of shout out your social media links, where we can find you?
No, thank you for having me. I hope that this blows up.
Yeah. Joe Rogan, are you listening?
Joe Rogan, who? Sorry, David Paulides. I love you. Your books are amazing. I just wish you would come up with a credible theory. And thank you so much for having me. Yeah. So my socials are on Instagram. It's feed.mate.consume.
Okay.
Those
will all be linked below.
Yeah, I think my Snapchat's the same. It's matefeed.kill.
Okay.
And that's just a commentary on human behavior. Mate, feed, consume.
That's
kill.
cool.
Yeah. But that's it. And definitely I'll come back, hopefully in the future, if you have me back when the book's out.
It would be great. You should come back on the date of release.
Yeah, but this is a huge honor. Thank you to Phil.
All right, so we're going to have COHASH back when the book's being released. And yeah, like the video if you would like to see maybe an episode, me and COHASH, about drugs.
Definitely.
The opioid epidemic, how it's affecting teens, adults, and everything in between. Because I think we both could have a lot to say about that. So yeah, give
Yeah.
the video a like, subscribe, and thank you
Subscribe.
so much for coming on. This was huge. This is the first time I'm gonna have an author. I mean, you're not an author yet, but
Yeah.
I mean, heck, you're pretty much there, So
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Phil.
yeah, shout out
And-
Phil, Pod Dog Studios.
Pod
for
Dog
your-
Studios, bitch.
Yeah, for your podcasting needs, your photo shoot needs. If you live around the Sacramento, Roseville, Folsom area, hit up Phil. I will link his Instagram below as well. So if you're interested in podcasting and you live around the area, hit him up. He does great photo shoots, drone footage. He really does it all. The lights, everything. This wouldn't be possible without him. So
Yeah, we should have had a drone for this one.
Yeah.
Flying over us. But
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan, so much. And I hope people enjoyed the video and subscribe to your channel. I hope this thing blows up. And yeah, comment on what you think or what you would like to see from this podcast in the future.
Yeah.
Or if you'd like us back or me back.
Yeah, that would be cool too. So let us know in the comments any thoughts that you have. And that was Your Friends Podcast. Say goodbye, Pablo. Goodbye. Ooh.
Bye.